Regis today still looks largely the same as when the class of 1941 was in attendance. 84th Street was not as tree-lined back then, but the iconic classical revival facade remains exactly the same, and will remain so for perpetuity, with Regis now designated a New York landmark and listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Then, it was through the 85th Street Tunnel where Regians would enter the building. Before the arched entryway was called the tunnel, it was supposed to be referred to by the more regal-sounding arcade. But by the time the class of 41 were at Regis, students had christened the entrance with a new moniker. After 102 years, Regis stopped using the tunnel for entry in 2016, and everyone enters via the foyer on 85th. In those days, before public announcement systems and the internet, a stop at the tunnel message board was crucial. The Regis Quad was a bare courtyard in the first several decades. There was an odd, freestanding wall where the quad opened up from the tunnel that today would seem ideal for projecting movies. That wall was popular for playing handball during breaks. Perhaps it was strategically located on the auditorium side of the quad to direct wayward tosses away from the stained windows of the chapel. Similarly, basketball hoops were lined up on the eastern side of the courtyard opposite the chapel. The quad had greater utility in the first few decades. Weather permitting, it was the main place for gathering during breaks, where students would hang out, trade books, and play games. Regis's iconic main stairwell, as well as the 84th Street foyer and hallway, have remained impeccably unchanged. Similarly, the chapel today looks identical to the one the 1941 boys used. However, in those years, pews were lined up right to the front of the altar. In the early years, Regis anticipated having up to 200 boys for each grade compared to only accepting around 135 now.
I would say the one major difference that we don't have, obviously the classrooms, some of the classrooms have been reconfigured with walls moved, principally, more recent times, making all except one of the classrooms interior facing to avoid the noise of the street. But there were no resource centers until the 70s. So what is now the teachers' faculty room, all the teachers were kind of crowded in there with their desks that they would use in between their classes. Only the seniors could use the main staircase. This side hallway over here above the lower gym, students were not allowed to walk down, only faculty, only adults. So not only was the building used slightly differently, but where students were allowed to be was much more tightly regulated. And even when the upper gym was created in 1958, that already was sort of a nod to a change in pedagogy where physical education was getting to seem more and more important. And the lower gym, which was somewhat adequate for the early years, but it was just deemed that not good enough for a school with, sometimes 650 boys to have such a small space for a gym.
Today's lower gym was the original gym. It was where basketball games were held and must have felt more like playing in a pit. A wall would make up one of the sidelines and spectators lined up right to the players. In those early decades, the cafeteria was located towards the south side of the school basement where the lockers are today. The cafeteria was considered sparse and dingy back then. There were no seats and boys had to eat standing along high tables. In the class of 1941 senior year, the cafeteria was renovated with a bit of fanfare, although it was mainly just a fresh coat of paint, additional tables, and a rearranged serving station. Regis boys then, like now, were happy to find levity in anything. Libraries played a far more essential role in schools back then. The Regis Library was a key source for books, but also news on current affairs during a period rife with domestic turmoil and international conflicts. The library was specifically located right above the chapel to minimize noise and disruptions during Mass. There are a few architectural features that have changed or are no longer in existence at Regis. The Regis Auditorium was a major source of pride during that era. It was designed to seat 1,700 people and would host packed audiences for plays, lectures, and debates. Not many photos remain of the original auditorium, before the top half was removed to build the upper gym. But here, we can see the Regis Auditorium in all its past grandeur, with a ceiling many felt was especially noteworthy. Regis also had a room that was designed specifically to host debates and speeches. Ultimately, it's another long-gone feature that's likely the most missed by Regians, the senior room. The rec lounge took up the equivalent of 3 current classrooms on the 3rd floor. The senior room was completed during the class of 1941's junior year, just in time for those boys to enjoy and initiate their own rules. The room was the culmination of a fundraiser that saw 300+ benefactors contributing to put together a recreational space for the upperclassmen to gather and have fun. The senior room was generously furnished with various gaming tables, a piano, and comfortable sofas. It even had a fireplace, although its use was limited as it probably wasn't convenient or safe to stock firewood up on the 3rd floor. When the seasons turned cold, someone reportedly brought in a portable coal stove, which probably didn't last very long. The Haven was so popular that seniors would post a doorman to enforce exclusivity, a responsibility the 1941 class would regularly entrust to none other than the very energetic Bill Toot, of Cherry Bomb fame. It was a great spot for Regians to enjoy their final year at Regis. Within the room, Regis seniors could play some pool, and smoke, break out in song around the piano while smoking, or play cards, and,
Seniors were allowed to smoke in a certain room in the building, which was now almost fantastical to think we would allow students to smoke, but again, it was a different world, and things were different.